Let me move on to Monica staff. Monica, you still back there? Yep. I will also let folks know Joanne Massaroni on behalf of the Narragansett Bay Commission signed up in favor and submitted a letter of support. Lauren Carson has signed up in favor, not speaking. Colin Schoenfeld, I'm sorry, I mispronounced your last name, Colin, I'm sorry, is coming up to speak. And Greg Garrett has signed up, but it's not indicated whether he's speaking or not. Would you like to come up and speak, Greg? I thought so. Okay. All right, so. Ms. Staff, why don't we start with you?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We applaud you for filing legislation that takes on some critical issues to our state. Energy efficiency, reducing our carbon footprint, and trying to eliminate or at least decrease our dependence on fuels, on fossil fuels. If the legislation, though, that you'd filed did only the things that the previous speakers had mentioned, I would not be here opposing this on behalf of the Realtor Association. Our concern is, at least as far as planning and coordination amongst the agencies goes, that makes perfect sense. Let's get the experts looking at state-of-the-art research and ways to solve these problems. But the concern that we have, though, is the legislation goes beyond that. It uses, in fact, my first reaction when I read it was the words "any means necessary" popped into my head, because this gives virtually unlimited authority to DEM in particular, and also the State Building Code Commission to promulgate codes and regulations. It's not just planning on their part. Specifically, and I did submit written testimony, so I'll just highlight a couple of sections of that rather than go through all of it. The State Building Code Standards Committee can adopt a code that would affect existing buildings. Now, they have the authority to regulate existing and new construction now. The difference is, though, that they can adopt any code that they wish as long as it's accepted someplace in order to meet the targets for energy efficiency. It doesn't give them any guidance. It just simply says you can adopt these codes. That's a huge leap of faith for people in the private sector to take, not knowing what code they're going to adopt, not having legislative oversight or even a hint of other than that this is intended to be resilient construction and guard us against storm surges. And that's it. That's very frightening to have that kind of blank slate. Another piece of it is DEM's authority. The legislation would allow DEM, with their specific targets for reducing, for improving our energy efficiency and also reducing the use of carbon, but this would allow DEM to change those targets. They can adopt stricter targets the way the legislation is worded, and maybe they can have public hearings to do that, but it gives them that authority before they've even completed the preliminary inventory of what we have out there now. The starting point for reducing our use of energy are 1990 standards. But the 1990 standards, I'm not sure if those were government standards that were in effect at the time or if those were the actual use of energy in Rhode Island at that time. It's just simply not clear from the legislation. Also, the inventory that DEM would be taking would be of current use, so we're not clear what the starting point might be. The legislation, although I'm certain it's not your intention, Chairman, but the legislation in this piece of it I think is so broadly written that would it give DEM or another state agency the authority to say you can't use air conditioning in the summer or set your thermostat at a certain level? I don't believe that that was your intent, but the power that the agencies have in this legislation as drafted, we just simply, unfortunately, need to oppose. But the planning, communication pieces, and also having the state leading the way, I think are very important and laudable parts of this legislation, and we would like to at least support that portion of it.
Thank you. Any questions from Ms. Staff? So I appreciate the Realtor's perspective. I know I met with you guys a couple of months ago. It might have been good to get back to me with some of the concerns a little sooner, because I actually think that I would differ that that is the way it's written along the way, but I appreciate you're an attorney and I'm not in that respect, but I don't think we actually give DEM those kinds of powers, but I'm certainly happy to look at the language and work on making sure we're not stepping in that kind of a direction. But again, I'd urge you maybe to get back to me a little sooner, maybe with these kinds of comments. Perhaps it would be a little bit more helpful for me in terms of being able to be helpful helpful in trying to work toward those kinds of changes. Any questions for Ms. Steff?
Thank you,
Rep.
Mr.
Palumbo.
Chair. You said you had written testimony?
Yes.
That you submitted? Okay, so it refers to the sections you're concerned about?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
It's in my pile. Thank you, the chairman tells me.
Anybody else? Thank you very much.